Brazil didn't just produce defenders, they produced icons. There was a time when Brazilian defenders didn't just stop goals, they were the backbone of the team. Cafu bombed down the right flank with the engine of a marathon runner and the brain of a tactician. Roberto Carlos could bend the laws of physics with his left foot. Lucio was a warrior in the heart of defense, mixing composure with aggression. Thiago Silva played like a professor in boots, calm, elegant, and always 3 steps ahead. But in recent years, something has shifted. You still see the joga bonito, the dribbles, the flair, and the dancing feet. You still hear the samba beats echo in stadiums whenever Brazil plays. But look past the fireworks and you'll notice the silence at the back. Because somewhere along the way, Brazil stopped producing truly world-class defenders. So what happened? How did a country that gave the world both artistry and authority on the pitch suddenly lose its defensive edge? Is it cultural, tactical, systemic? Let's dive into this decline and find out whether Brazil's next great wall will ever rise again. Let's rewind a bit. Think back to the all-time great defenders Brazil once had. We're talking about players who didn't just do their job, they defined it. Cafu is the perfect example. A 2-time World Cup winner, he was arguably the best right back of his generation. He was fast, relentless, and a natural-born leader. He could bomb forward all game long and still have the engine to track back. Then there's Roberto Carlos. That thunderbolt of a free kick against France in 1997 is burned into every football fan's memory. But Carlos wasn't just a flashy moment. He was a tireless, explosive fullback who tracked every runner and won his duels. Lucio, commanding, rock solid, an absolute warrior in the heart of Brazil's 2002 World Cup winning backline. He was brave, aggressive, and rarely put a foot wrong. He also had defenders like Thiago Silva in his prime, and even David Luiz when he was on form. They weren't just defenders, they were technically gifted footballers who played with confidence and composure. Brazilian defenders didn't just clear the ball away from their goal, they played the game with elegance and they owned it. Over the past decade or two, Brazil's focus seems to have shifted. Instead of building balanced teams with strong defenders, there's been more emphasis on flair, creativity, and forward power. And to be fair, it makes sense because attacking players sell tickets. Neymar, Vinicius Jr., Rodrigo, Endrick, Esteval Willian, the list goes on. Defensive roles started becoming less glamorous. Young kids growing up wanting to be the next Neymar, not the next Lucio. Training academies, especially at the grassroots level, began focusing more on technique and attacking drills. In many ways, it mirrors a larger cultural shift. Brazil, the land of joga bonito, slowly drifted away from a full pitch identity to one that prioritizes front foot football, sometimes at the cost of structure. The top Brazilian defenders of the past often made their names in Europe. They went abroad, adapted to new systems, and returned to the national team as seasoned, sharp, and tactically solid players. But that pipeline has thinned. Brazil used to have 5 or 6 top defenders playing at elite European clubs at the same time. Now, it's rare. One reason could be European clubs now scouting more ready-made defenders from countries like France, Germany, and even Croatia. These players come from systems that prioritize defensive shape from an early age. And even when Brazilian defenders do move to Europe, it often takes them longer to adapt to the physical and tactical demands of leagues like the Premier League or the Serie A. Another big change in football is what teams expect from defenders today. They're expected to build play, dictate tempo, break lines with passes, and sometimes even carry the ball forward themselves. In many ways, centre-backs have to think like midfielders. Look at players like Virgil van Dijk, Ruben Dias, even next-gen star Pau Cubarsí. They're calm, precise, and integral to how their teams play out from the back. In this new world, the tactical education of defenders matters more than ever. It's not just about raw talent anymore. It's about understanding positioning, reading the press, and playing under pressure. This is where Brazil might be falling behind. Grassroots coaching in Brazil still prioritizes 1v1 skills, dribbling and flair, but they don't fully prepare young defenders for what's needed in elite modern football. Countries like France and Germany have invested heavily in structured youth academies where defensive fundamentals are taught from the age of 7 or 8. In Brazil, the youth structure is more fragmented. Some academies do a fantastic job, like Sao Paulo, Grêmio, and Palmeiras, but there's still inconsistency across the board. Not every academy puts enough focus on defensive roles. Defenders in Brazil are often seen as a stepping stone to becoming midfielders or forwards. If a kid is quick and technical, he's moved up the pitch. The country loves to celebrate goals, but not clean sheets. One of the major changes that shaped Brazil's decline in defensive output is how the domestic game itself has evolved. Brazilian clubs were historically seen as incubators for raw talent, but now face constant pressure to sell players young due to financial limitations. Attackers naturally fetch higher prices and greater attention, so academies have slowly begun focusing more on producing wingers, forwards, and creative midfielders. Clubs rarely have the time or resources to patiently develop a disciplined, tactical centre-back or a positionally mature fullback. Defenders often require years of mentoring, learning the nuances of spacing, anticipation, and leadership. Brazilian domestic football still leans towards a more open, expressive, and attack-heavy style. That's great for viewers, but not always ideal for nurturing elite-level defenders who can withstand the intensity and pace of top European competition. In Europe, defenders are expected to understand positional play, operate within rigid systems, and constantly manage transitions. Brazilian defenders often need a year or two to adapt, and by that time, they're often overshadowed by players already trained in Europe. For decades, Brazil had a reputation for producing the world's best fullbacks. They were a unique breed of defenders, with the stamina of midfielders, the flair of wingers, and the discipline to defend when needed. In modern football, fullbacks are asked to do more than ever before. They invert into midfield, launch overlapping runs, act as playmakers at times, and sometimes even mark the opposition's most dangerous players. The role has become highly tactical, and academies in Europe are beginning to outpace Brazil in this development. Take Alexander-Arnold, whose tactical responsibilities were shaped by data-driven coaching from a young age. Compare that to Brazilian prospects, many of whom are still developed in a more traditional, less analytical environment. The gap is only growing. It's not all bad news, of course. Brazil still produces good defenders, just fewer great ones. Militao is a strong example. He's played at the highest level with Real Madrid, and when he's fit, he looks like a throwback to Brazil's glory days in defense. Gleison Bremer has impressed at Juventus for his physicality and timing. Arsenal's Gabriel has been key to their defensive solidity in recent years. Marquinhos is one of the few world-class defenders Brazil has produced in recent years. Smart, composed, and developed in the early 2010s, he had the benefit of a system that's now eroding. And let's not forget Thiago Silva. Even in his late 30s, he was Brazil's best defender at the 2022 World Cup. That says more about the state of Brazil's defensive talent than it does about Silva's longevity. Brazilian football culture has always celebrated flair. The defender is rarely the hero in Brazilian football folklore. This cultural bias very subtly shapes player development. Coaches and parents are more likely to push a talented child towards midfield or attack rather than defense. Even in coaching badges and youth training modules, there is less emphasis on structured defensive coaching compared to top European systems. Brazil needs a reinvestment in defensive coaching at the grassroots level, with as much pride and focus as they give to offensive flair. There must also be an effort to keep young defenders in the domestic game a little longer, allowing them to gain maturity and leadership before they jump to Europe. If Brazilian football can reframe its understanding of what makes a beautiful game, maybe it can reclaim its status as a producer of world-class defenders again. The country's fall from grace in defensive excellence wasn't sudden. It happened slowly as priorities shifted, coaching systems lagged, and economic realities took over. It's not that Brazil has lost the ability to produce world-class defenders, it's just that the system doesn't prioritize them anymore. With all that said, do you think there's even a single world-class Brazilian defender today? Let us know in the comments below.